The QPR podcast is brought to you in association with partypoker.com. Sign up now using the bonus code QPRPOD and Party Poker will match your initial deposit.
QPR, QPR, Brisbane Rangers are on the up and up. QPR, QPR, now we're heading for European Cup.
Hello and welcome. We've done some strange podcasts at times, but we've never done one from the House of Commons. This is a first for a QPR podcast, or any podcast I'd imagine. So it's myself, Paul Finney, Chris Charles, Andrew Scherer, named after the famous footballer, I'm sure, but he's got more hair. And of course, Alan Johnson. You got many titles after your name, but today it's just QPR. Is that
Absolutely, Alan Johnson, QPR.
First of all, tell us how and why QPR, and how did you get into it?
Because I was born in Kensal Town, Nottingdale, whatever not Notting Hill. We didn't have Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant down our way very much, and QPR were the local team. In fact, in those days, I don't remember anyone supporting teams other than their local team. You didn't have this phenomenon where people supported Manchester United, who lived in Fulham or whatever. And I used to go to watch Fulham and Chelsea because QPR were third division, of course, firmly third division. And my first game against Bournemouth, 1938, they'd left the third division south, so it was third division. They'd only been promoted once in their whole history, just after the war. So to see first division football, I'd go to Fulham and I'd go to Chelsea. And my friend, I went to school in Chelsea. The kids there, if they lived in Chelsea, they supported Chelsea. Lived in Fulham, they supported Fulham. Brentford, which was our big rival. They were some of the kids around our way supported Brentford because they were another local team. You didn't support teams outside of your patch. So I was bitten by QPR from a very young age.
So a lot of people would not know Nottingdale, but it was actually quite a poor area, like patronising it in any manner. Which means that QPR were a very working class football club with probably we're ambitious now, but in them days I guess QPR wasn't very ambitious and couldn't afford to be.
No, they always had an ambition to be more than the third division club they were. So when I remember when Alec Stock came there, and players like John Collins and Mark Lazarus and players that Roy Bentley, who'd been an England international and now was playing at right back. There was a bit of there was a gloss about QPR that made you think they were very different to Brentford, for instance. That seemed to be in a mindset that they were a third or fourth division team, despite the fact they'd been in the second division quite recently. Whereas QPR, I think, were always quite ambitious, but they didn't have the money. But money wasn't a big factor of football in those days.
Man, you had Reg Allen in them days as well.
Reg Allen, a great goalkeeper, sold for, I think, was then a record fee for a goalkeeper.
I've always thought this year a film in his life story. He had the most amazing life story, like one-man submarine, he got captured during the war and everything else.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really, really interesting story.
Fascinating. I mean, when I started watching him, Ray Drinkwater was the goalkeeper. And there's a player called Drinkwater who plays for Leicester now, and I often wonder, it's not a common name, is it? Whether he's related to him. But so it was Ray Drinkwater, it was Tony Ingham was playing at centre half. We paid big money for a guy called Jim Dugdale from Aston Villa, and that must have been about £2,000, I suppose. But to Rangers, it was the equivalent of a small fortune.
So what are the memories of your first game?
Very vivid. I remember the Bournemouth's nickname. I'm pretty sure I've seen different nicknames for Bournemouth, but at that time was the Candymen. And there was a guy in red and white with a top hat that used to lead them out onto the pitch. A very early mascot. Wow. At least he wasn't walking around one of stupid bear bloody men. But, black and white scarf and a cane like a stick of rock, and out they came. Bournemouth and Boscombe Athletic. They've taken Boscombe Athletic off now. I remember them running out on a pitch, because you could walk anywhere in the ground then. And I'm not even sure whether Rangers won. We had a prolific goal scorer, Brian Bedford. In fact, it might still be the record holder, I don't know.
I think George Goddard, isn't it?
Oh, it was George Goddard before him, right, who was part of the promotion team second in the late 40s. anyway, you know, we had a good team, and I'm pretty sure we won. But you know, that was the start.
And the hardcore support then was probably maybe 4,000, 4,000 or 5,000,
something like that.
Yeah.
It's a guy called Albert Cox, who was my mate Tony Cox's dad, and he was absolute kind of. Well, I say the story in my childhood memoirs. My dad, Sunday Times, said the word feckless could have been invented for him. He was out playing the piano in the pubs and womanising and drinking. But Mr. Cox was that kind of stolid working class person. Worked for the London Underground as an engineer. Wore his army beret from the Second World War. Always wore it, a bit like Frank Spencer sort of thing. Worked on the allotment. You know, never stopped working for his family. Every other Saturday, he would have his place where he stood in Loftus Road. So my mum didn't particularly want me to go, aged 8, to a football match. When I said Mr. Cox was going to be there, she said that was fine. And he would stand there, like with his flask of coffee and his sandwiches, watching the match. Wouldn't take any notice of me at all, or his son Tony. We used to run around everywhere, you know, sort of change position at half time, go and stand at the other end, which you could do in those days.
And sorry, are you just alluded to your book there, This Boy, your memoirs, and anyone who's read it, it's a really good book. I suggest you read it. But you had a pretty rough trot of it growing up in Notting Hill.
Yeah,
I mean, was QPR a sort of form of escapism at the time, did it?
I guess it was, yeah. I mean, that, music, books, and actually, you know, my father never took me to any matches or anything, but he gave me the handbook. Every team used to have a handbook at the end of the season with all the stats, and it was on shiny paper. And he gave me the cover was missing, unfortunately, the handbook from their promotion season in, I think it was 46, 47, whatever.
Wow.
And, you know, that started me off with my interest in QPR. So I sort of thank him for that. But, I mean, other people had it rougher. Everyone lived. I mean, it was a poor area, as you say, and everyone, you didn't notice, you didn't think you were living in poverty because everybody else was living in the same conditions, you know, no indoor toilets, no running hot water, no electricity, gas, buckets of urine in the corner because you didn't want to go down to the terrible Kazi that was traditionally about 2 families on every floor, about 16 people in a 3-storey house. Lord. They were terrible conditions, but they were terrible conditions all over the country.
The weird thing I always remember, because obviously I grew up away from Nottingdale, but I lived in Westburn Park, was when you speak to the older people about Nottingdale and the area and everything else, no one ever regretted living there or coming up through there, because it was like a platform for life. They learned, because and it was one of the mirrors. I guess the community is it's massively different now, isn't it? I mean, we talk about Julia Roberts films and stuff like that. They wouldn't have made a film in them days. And you were talking about that exhibition. I mean, were you in the photographs from the exhibition?
I think my sister's in one. This is Roger Main, who came and took these photographs in the mid-50s of Southam Street. I mean, just rocked up in my street. My sister's in the background of one. I'm not in any of them. But it's very different. It's very different now, but society is very different now. You know, in those days, it wasn't an age of peaceful innocence. I mean, if you were different, if you'd come over from Northern Ireland, for instance, my mother came from Liverpool. Tried to change her accent very quickly, not because she was ashamed of it, because if you didn't fit in. When the black guys came over from the Caribbean, at our invitation to come and drive our buses and thought they were coming to the mother country and, you know, they'd get a big welcome, it was rough for them. It was rough for women. You know, a married woman couldn't hire a television or sign a HP, a hire purchase agreement, without her husband counter-signing it. And if you were deserted by your husband, as my mother was, that was it. All the benefits, child benefit as was, went to the husband. It didn't come to the woman at all. So it was a rough time. And I think, you know, society's got better over the years, not worse. But you're right, a lot of people who went through that, who've written to me, read the book, grew up in Southam Street or whatever, have done really well for themselves. You know, they've gone on. So I suppose in a way it was I wouldn't choose that childhood for any of my kids, but it kind of was character forming, I suppose.
And as Chris says, going to QPR was a great escape because it was just all glory, wasn't it?
Was it? Yeah, Jesus.
You have a bad week, you took the Rangers and they win. Everyone's happy.
Yeah, but I tell you, this as QPR fans. I mean, you know, for Man United fans, Arsenal fans, Chelsea fans, every year, they're blasé about success. For us, when success came, I mean, in particular, you know, I was there at the birth of rock and roll, and I was there when QPR when Rodney came, and when everything suddenly changed. Suddenly we were third division, second division, League Cup final, obviously, and second division, and then first division. Rangers in the first division in the top tier. My God, you sort of soaked all that in, and I think we appreciated it more. We do appreciate the bits of success we get more than those that get success all the time.
But I've always been proud of our club. I mean, the thing is, with Rangers fans, I've always noticed, and I've said it many times in the podcast, we are more than a football club. We are a community. Like if you see a QPR fan, no matter where you are, you could be in the Sahara Desert. You meet a Rangers fan, you have a good yarn. You know what I mean? Like whereas I live in North London, so you get like Spurs and Arsenal fans, and they don't talk to each other. They just wear shirts. Rangers fans, I do think, have a special bond, and that could be because we struggled. You say Rodney. I mean, you're lucky. So I missed all that. I missed Rodney. I missed Stanley. I had Steve Slade.
Oh dear.
It wasn't so good. But what do you remember about Rodney then? When you first
everything. There's his photos up there. He was just amazing. He was amazing. You would pay to get into the ground just to watch Rodney in the pre-match kick-around. He'd juggle the ball. Sometimes he'd juggle oranges. I mean, he was a complete showman. I mean, there was one guy who played for West Brom called David Burnside, who was supposed to be a fantastic ball player, and then kind of joined a circus after he left football, doing juggling acts. So Rodney could have done that. But he was a big man, but he had this real touch, like a ballet dancer's touch with the ball. So the things Rodney did with the ball, and none of it was ever on film. They never filmed our matches. Third division, second division.
Of course,
You'll see Rangers fans now who say, we just looked at each other aghast at the things he'd done. And sometimes, he did the same at Man City, but my mate who's a Man City fan tells me that Rodney once took a penalty and tried to lob the goalkeeper from the penalty spot. And he missed, but everyone clapped. He was just a showman. You know? So I loved Rodney. It was worth going to watch just a little bit of skill now. Everyone does banana shots now, as we used to call them, bending the ball. Rodney was doing that in the 50s and 60s.
And presumably you went to the League Cup final in '67.
Yeah, it was in the book. And then played a gig with my band that evening in Shepherd's Bush, some wedding. And they were all Rangers fans there.
Wow, it must have been a fantastic day.
Jesus, it was amazing.
Did anyone leave at half time?
It was amazing. No, nobody left. Because you'd have left with Rangers 2-0 down.
Yeah.
And Chippy Clark, who was a winger for us, having scored the 2 goals. So how was his real name? Clive Clark. Chippy, he was known as, had gone to West Brom from Rangers. And he was scoring 2 goals against us in the first half.
That's so very QPR, though, isn't it? To be fair, if it was ever going to happen, it always happens.
It's going from 2-0 down.
I always say this: when you look at the newspaper and someone hasn't scored for 80 games and they're playing us, you know who's getting the hat trick, don't you? You just know. Did you go to Wembley with the last playoff final? Did you get to
yes,
that one?
Yeah, I was there.
So
I was on my way to the Hay Book Festival, by the way. I told them I'd be late because I was going to the Rangers match.
Brilliant.
And when it was coming near the end, right,
you're probably the only person there.
Yeah, I was with Carolyn, my partner. We're down to 10 men.
Yeah.
I said to Carolyn, right, we're late getting to it. We've got this drive to Hay. Let's leave now. Listen to the extra time on radio because it's only going to go one way.
Yeah.
We're going to lose or we're going to win it on penalties. And almost as soon as I said that, Bobby Zamora scores. And Jesus, the emotion. And probably people say this thing about went up too soon, you know, maybe we did. I mean, no one thought we were in any shape, really, did they, to be in the Premier League? We were lucky against Derby. But, you know, the glory of going straight back up. You wouldn't swap that for anything.
No, exactly. No one can take that away from us. No one can take... I mean, took my little girl. I'm going to get in trouble with this. Somebody on the message board said he mentions his little girl every time. So apologies for offending you, but it was because I took her along. It was a particularly magical day, and as you say, we do it the difficult way, and we're not used to winning stuff. So it was extra special for Arsenal or Chelsea. You get that every other year. It's no big deal, really.
Yeah. But for us, it was great. Amazing. And I remember the last time I went with I've got a son from an earlier marriage as well, a son from this marriage, but me and Jamie, my eldest son, went to see Rangers against Oxford United in the League Cup.
That never happened.
Milk Cup.
I love you talk about Alan.
I know. But we had to drive back. We lived in Slough at the time, so we had to drive back from Wembley up the M4 with all these coaches of Oxford fans, and we broke down on the side of the road with our Rangers sticker in. No! You can imagine my son, who was about 10 or 11. I think it damaged him for life. It scarred him for life.
But he still goes.
He's all right. Oh, big Rangers fan.
Yeah. And is he the musician? I know
he's the musician. Yeah.
No, because I've read about your book taking him along when he was 7 for his first game.
Yeah.
Which would have been when.
That was against Liverpool in 78, 79.
Right, okay.
It was kind of just the end of the glory days. We're coming to the end of that team with Jerry Francis and Don Gibbons, Stan Bowles and all that. Yeah.
But you mentioned Rodney earlier. I mean, I know this is the sort of Messi Maradona question, but having watched both of them, I saw Bowles. I didn't see him as much as I'd like to have seen him, but I never got to see Rodney. Simply, I wasn't old enough. But how would you compare those two?
Very well. They were both ball players. I'd go for Rodney because Rodney did amazing things. Stanley was much more successful. I don't know if he scored more goals, but he certainly scored them at a higher level, whereas Rodney was always kind of lower level. But I say in the book that one miserable bloody wet end of season game, these kind of games you've got nothing to play for, you wonder why you're there. I was there with my mate Albie Horn, who was a postman with me at Slough, and it was Rangers versus Carlisle, and Carlisle had this player Bowles, and as we walked out I honestly said to Bertie Horn, we ought to bloody buy him. Of course. I kind of credit
excellent.
We're doing that.
Career in scouting awaits.
Yeah, absolutely. I once saw Rodney run the full length of the pitch, and I hope someone listening to this was at this game. It was against, I think, Bristol City, and the full back was like bow-legged and bald. That might just be in my imagination, but Rodney ran with a ball practically from our own penalty area, and he did this thing with the ball like you do with a snooker ball on a snooker table. If you hit it like that, it goes forwards and stops, and it makes it look as if it's on elastic. Rodney did that with the ball half the length of the pitch. This fullback didn't know what to do when the ball was coming out and going back, and finished the run with a shot that just missed, and everyone just turned, as so often with Rodney. They couldn't believe it, and it made their kind of weekend.
Yeah,
he did amazing things with the ball, which Stanley, because he was much more disciplined, I suppose, as well. He was very skillful, but didn't have that level of showmanship. So I think Rodney would just snatch it on that.
I can only say I'm jealous of all of you, to be fair.
Yeah. You saw Johnny Byrne. Johnny Byrne was Simon Stainrod. I mean, and the American guy,
Wiggly.
Wiggly.
Andy Sinton used to love as well.
We had that list when Tony Curry had that long line of number 10.
But you say that in the book as well, that although we've never been as successful as some of our peers, especially in London, teams we won't mention, that we've always had players. We've always had flair players. I think you mentioned Adel Taarabt.
Taarabt being the latest one.
There's always been someone that we can look up to. And
I like the fact you managed to mention Taarabt's name in the House of Commons. well done, Chris. That's the first.
Can you tell me what's happened to Taarabt? Is he still with us?
He's gone to Benfica.
I think he's struggling a bit. He's struggling a bit with weight issues.
Jeez, he's gone on loan, or he's been signed?
No, he's been a 5-year deal.
Crikey.
Yeah,
but I think it's going to be a 5 hamburger deal by the end of it. He's not doing well. But it's a shame because probably one of the talented players I've seen since Wiggly.
It's such a waste.
Very, very talented player. That promotion season, that ball he did at Coventry with the outside of his foot, and in comes Routledge. A big mistake to sell him.
Absolutely.
But then maybe they wanted to go sometimes, the players. But the other thing is, you think about all the players, Tony Curry, as you said, Stainrod. We've been blessed with number 10s. Kevin Gallen. It's some of what we've had, but you only get that as a QPR fan. I mean, other teams don't understand when we got about the number 10 shirt being so special. Even I'm sure today players want to have that number 10 shirt. So do you imagine back in the day the players you've seen? I mean, you're blessed. I mean, do you think that Rodney should have had more England caps, or is that just a
of course he should. Of course he should. But Ramsey, I mean, famously, when Ramsey said to him, "I'm going to pull you off at half time," and Rodney said, "Oh, that's good. At Man City, we usually just get an orange." He took the mick. But you had to see Ramsey's England after the World Cup. I mean, he was so, our World Cup team were wingless wonders, but you might as well call them flairless wonders. Okay. He didn't like flair. He wanted Jeff Hurst back to goal, laying the ball off. At the time, someone said Jeff Hurst is the best player off the ball. And I thought, what's the point? It's like saying they're the best violinists without a violin. You know, Rodney was the best player with the ball. Not off the, but I'm surprised that Ramsey played him at all. It was only public pressure that made him pick him. I remember he came on as a sub against Switzerland for England in a friendly. And then what? He got, I think, 7-8 caps, something like that. And I'm surprised he got that many, actually, because he was such an anti-establishment and he wasn't going to do things the way Ramsey told him to do it. He was an entertainer, Rodney. He just wanted the crowd to go home having seen something that was exceptional and remarkable.
And that's a similar story with Stan. He got five caps, I think, in the end.
Yeah, and players like Len Shackleton, who's another great entertainer in the past, Wilf Mannion, you know, they never really get the recognition they deserve. In fact, Len Shackleton was famous for doing his autobiography. One chapter was headed "The Average Football Director's Knowledge of the Game." It was 4 blank pages.
Which is probably true. I was saying that we say we're the Maverick number 10, but we certainly had a Maverick chairman at the time as well. I mean, what Jim did at QPR was
great. Yeah.
I mean, you know, when you think of the whole ground he built. I mean, I remember, I'm old enough now. He wouldn't think it, I know. So remember when
no one was contradicting you.
No.
Did you know? So he had to say, "You wouldn't think it, I know."
For the benefit of the listeners, I look like Steve McQueen. Yeah. The ground was actually modern, wasn't it? When you think of it with the stands, but what you did,
South Africa,
how you built it, really. You think it was you see all photographs. It's 50. It was a mud. Basically, the loft was a mud bank, wasn't it? Really, you know. And you look at the ground that he left us, and what do you think? Will you be sad when and if QPR actually ever do leave Loftus Road?
Not if they leave it for Royal Oak. I think, you know, it's near enough. If they left it for Milton Keynes or something, you know, obviously. But I kind of think if they're going to be the kind of club that we want them to be, or I think we want them to be, successful, top tier, they're constrained where they are at the Loftus Road. So moving back nearer, I suppose, Queen's Park,
absolutely,
where we started,
Old
Old Common, is not outrageous. Whether they're going to pull it off, I don't know. So many.
You must have a few strings you can pull.
Believe me, I haven't.
It's a massive regeneration, isn't it? I mean, we're only very, I suppose, as luck would have it, if we had gone there 10 years ago, we probably would have got it easily. And now, because of the trains and everything else, it's a massive development. But it's interesting you say, because a lot of people don't want to leave the ground. I'm torn up myself because I found out, you know, I was going to have a child, not me personally. And, you know, memories of Loft is brilliant. Because when you came from Belfast, I didn't know anyone. So I made all my friends at Loftus Road. So, and the memories and that, though. So I'm kind of thinking, if they do...
I'd be sad. But I went during the White City experiment. You know, I trailed all the way down to White City. It was awful. It was awful. This was this huge ground with this running track that cut you off from the pitch. It held something like 70,000. It's built for the Olympics in '48. That was you were just talking about Rangers' ambition. I mean, that was 1962. You know, they decided to move to White City. There was a statement of ambition. But there's kind of 4,000 of us rattling around in this huge stadium, no atmosphere. You could hardly see, you know, it wasn't like Loftus Road, you could see everything, you're experiencing it all. So that was something that didn't work at all. And fortunately, they gave up at the end of the season, moved back.
Yeah, they were just there for that one.
Just that one. And I don't think it was anything to do with the deal to get, I think it was just they realised they'd made a mistake.
What happened to Loftus Road during that season then? I mean,
I don't know.
Did they just sort of say, well, we'll just keep it nice just in case they want to come back? Or what?
Well, they had a lot of foresight if they did.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, today it'd have been sold off for houses, and that would be.
Maybe they were clever enough because it was in the Jim Gregory period. Maybe they were clever just at the start of it. I think it was anyway. Maybe it was they knew they would try it out and see how it worked for a year because nobody else wanted the White City. It was virtually decrepit. It's gone now, of course. So you know they might have had an offer they couldn't refuse. See how it goes, and if you don't work,
it's great having a try before you buy a football stadium, isn't it?
You lads want to research it.
We researched everything thoroughly for this podcast in the pub beforehand.
As a sort of member of the younger generation of QPR fans.
Steady on.
Well, ish. It's always lovely to hear about all sort of the stories in the 50s and 60s and the 70 glory years and the First Division. And as Paul says, how QPR has always been kind of a community. There's a community of fans, and it's part of the local community as well. Do you still see that going down to Loftus Road, that still exists? And what kind of do you think there's a danger with the way modern football goes that clubs, even like QPR, which have very strong community roots, might start drifting away from that and become something slightly different?
I think, yes, it does still exist, and if it still exists now, I'm encouraged that it will exist in the future, because we have been through, seasons we'd rather forget, I suppose, in the Premier League. So it's not as if we're sitting in, the Championship thinking, what would life be like in the Premiership? We've been there. And I think, remarkably, that atmosphere has stayed there, that community feeling has stayed there. So, yeah, I think that'll last into the future. It doesn't feel any different to me going to Rangers now than it did, in 1958 against Bournemouth. I mean, I saw South Africa Road Stadium going up, so I'm used to that from the early 70s. Used to sit in, that's where I used to sit. And it doesn't look all that different to me. It's a bit of continuity. It's a bit like the Queen, she's been there all my life, and so's Loftus Road. Yeah. And, they didn't have the sponsors' names on the back of the shirts and all that. And, God, the pre-match kickabout. I mean, that is just, what is all that about now? I mean, they just used to wander out about 10 to 3. Stan had just put a bet on. Someone had dragged him in, Rodney used to ponce around, as I say, playing juggling oranges or whatever. And then the opposition would run out and you start playing. Now, God. Yeah, that's all changed. But apart from that,
well, it's all all the ritual beforehand when you have to do all the shaking hands. It's all for TV, isn't it? Really. But I mean, sort of on similar theme. Do you think, like over the past few years, we seem to be getting back on track now that QPR sort of lost its identity a bit when we were signing all these players on astronomical wages and. Which all sounded good on paper, but then you had this sort of dressing room of discontent and
I do think we're back on. I saw them when they came and played at Hull. In fact, I was lucky enough to meet Tony and Les Ferdinand. God, there's me. I've got my photograph taken. Wow. I had a selfie with Les. God, I wouldn't have missed that. And suddenly, young Furlong, Paul Furlong's son, was playing his first match, and there was another guy on a bench who was come through Doherty, through our own, and that was the first time I'd seen any homegrown players in years, and they lost, but Joe Barton got sent off. It was another, but they played all right. Furlong played all right as well, and actually Les Ferdinand said to me, it's too long since we brought players through, and that's been a big gap in what we've done. I mean, if Arsenal can do that and Man United can do it, we can do it with the kind of talent that's come through. And, Sterling went off to Liverpool. There's a load more Sterlings around in West London who would come and play for QPR, I'm sure.
I think we had a great scouting system. We like players like Alan, Goddard, Macca, Ian Stewart. I'm not being embarrassed.
Wasn't he? Yeah. He was
fantastic.
We had most of the Northern Ireland team we've had there.
There's a great, actually, we're going to France next season. Thanks very much. Anyway, but you had players like that there, and we seem to have, like when we sold Sinton, we managed to get Sinclair. It was a very, very well run club, and I think where we did go wrong was we tried to put names before talent, and that's. But I can see what you're saying. I think Chris and Les are going to change that whole mindset, and that's not a bad thing. Even if it takes 2 or 3 seasons to get out of this league, as long as we can go back up and compete again. And I don't suppose you were there when we beat Chelsea 1-0. That was a nice night. I was there when we beat Chelsea 1-0. That was fantastic. I mean, we were bloody lucky, but we beat them. But the fact that we kept Charlie Austin and Matt Phillips was just such good news on the transfer, wasn't it? And so you get the feeling that we kept the best of that terrible period of just buying in players. The mercenaries have gone, by and large. Some of our own players are coming through. There's a bit of a spark there about it, so we shouldn't get over. I know it's early in the season, but I'm more optimistic about the future of us now in the Championship than I was beginning of last season when we were in the Premiership.
No, absolutely. Yeah. That's that, man.
Now the thing is, there's a question I want to ask you. You don't have to answer because obviously you're a professional politician, right? You understand this. But when you're in these conferences, like when you're playing in the government, and you go to all these places, they've got the headphones, they've got the interpreter. Did you ever sneak in a QPR game?
What, tune in to Radio Shepherd's Bush? No, I didn't.
I didn't think you would, Alan.
In my memoirs, he might read something different, but I'll say that.
Yeah. I just want to talk, before we wrap this up, about other MPs in the House of Commons. I mean, presumably there's a few big football fans among your peers. But are there any other MPs you particularly have a natter with about football who are any more QPR
Stephen
fans?
Pound, there's a guy Stephen Pound who's the MP for Ealing. Stephen's a great crack. He's a Fulham fan, but his son's an absolute mad keen QPR fan.
Wow.
And goes to all the games. And so I speak to Stephen a lot. Philip Gould was the guy you were trying to think of. Philip Gould wasn't an MP, but he was Tony Blair's ace kind of person who had all these strategy groups and these focus groups that he used to consult, and died tragically of cancer. But Philip was a mad keen supporter. Across the road is the Treasury, the chief, the permanent secretary at the Treasury, who later went to the Bank of England, was a mad keen QPR fan.
Okay.
They're around all the time. I'm trying to think of another MP.
Michael Gove?
Michael Gove, lives in Barbie Road in Notting Hill and is apparently a Rangers season ticket holder. He probably does have a season ticket. I don't think Michael's I don't know. If he's a QPR, if he's paying money to go and see QPR, great. I'll have a chat with him sometime about it.
we had
He's not a natural football man, I don't think.
Natural a lot of things. There was Jeremy Brown was QPR as well. We had him
Jeremy Brown, that's right, lived down. I used to talk to him after every game.
He is proper Rangers.
He's gone now.
Yes, I know.
Like almost every league.
Yeah.
But to be fair to Michael Gove, of course, if he wants to come on the podcast, he's more than he can.
And any Chelsea fans that you in the House of Commons that you speak to?
No.
Because Tony Banks, God rest his soul, he used to be a Chelsea fan. Was
the MP for West Ham, which was different. But he was a Chelsea fan.
He was one of the Chelsea fans I actually didn't mind.
But I admired Tony because he said, so I'm the MP in Hull, but I make sure I let people know, if they ask me a question, I'm a QPR fan.
Yeah.
You can't change your team just for a kind of political advantage.
No.
And I think football fans respect that more, as they did with Tony being a Chelsea fan. He couldn't change that.
And David Cameron saying he's a Villa or West Ham or
and saying West Ham. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah,
staggering.
I mean, that to me is a worse slip than kind of letting out a state secret. To be, to forget the team you support, which means you didn't support them
in the first.
Yeah,
there's an awful lot of that in politics now, on all sides. They pretend they're football.
I always find it funny. You think football, is arouses such passion in people, but there's not that many MPs get involved with football or speak that publicly about it.
No, not down here in Scotland. Ian Murray, who's our only MP now in Scotland. He led the big change at Hearts to get the fans to have a say. He's the chair of Hearts football, and part of the reason he is our only MP up in Scotland is what he did at Hearts. It was incredible.
Is there room for MPs to do more? I mean, I know Damien Collins, I think, is the only MP that springs to mind too.
When you say do more to help, yes, there is. If there's, I've done a bit when David Lloyd was owning Hull City. He was going to shut the ground and shut the keys away and all that. And I got involved in all that, and I've always been involved in the interests of Hull City in my constituency when they need you. They don't. You can't change their fortunes on the field. You can deal with the David Lloyd stuff. Was about the Inland Revenue, shutting the team down and coming to the front of the queue when they went belly up. So you can influence the Treasury to say, look, this is an important community asset. You can do things like that for them. But I think, just going back to what you were saying about now it being quite fashionable to follow football teams, I think there is a feeling that MPs shouldn't pretend to be more than they are in terms of helping a club. The club don't like it, the fans don't like it, and it's not very good for the MP. If you support a team, we just go along quietly and support them. Don't make a big thing about it. Like not go on podcasts, You know what I mean? Except I don't get anything out of this because there's not a single person listening who'll be able to vote in Hull.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. Yeah, there's a few lists. Well, who am I to talk about where we should come from, where we don't come from?
Yeah.
I dare say it's quite a few. We have a massive listenership, by the way, Alan.
Sure.
10 million people be listening to this, so it'd be fun. And the thing is, when you used to go to Rangers, did you even go to? What was your favourite? Did you have a favourite pub back in the day, and that you went to, or did you just go to the?
No,
Rangers?
what I did when I was going there most regularly, like every other Saturday, it was 2 or 3 of us in a car from Slough. Slough's a big kind of people moved out of West London, like I did, to the big council estates in Slough. So we used to come down in the car, and you had to get back out on that A40, and so you'd always sort of get back home. If you'd gone in a pub at all, you'd be close to home.
Yeah.
Not down it.
So when you lived in Slough, you remember when Reading didn't have hoops?
They weren't far away, you know. Ian Gillard was off the Brickwell estate in Slough as well.
He was on the podcast last year. I didn't realise he played for so many years until he came on. He actually went through it. I mean, talk about a legend. I mean, the years that he did, nearly 16 years. I think him and Macca were the top appearances.
And very understated, Gillard. I mean, he played for England, but he never made a big thing of it. He was quietly got on. I don't know if he ever played for another team after he left Rangers. He probably did.
I'm not sure. I think he did for a while, but he was very
unshowy. You know, Dave Clement was more, his oppo at right back was more of a showy kind of player and a amazing player. Gillard quietly did his thing.
Well, we always had players like this. Neil and Dawes had the same thing for years at full backs as well. We had that, but Dave. I always remember obviously even knows the socks time. But I mean, again, another player that I missed. But God, so you're right. Go back. I know we'll hold you up and that there, but that 76 team. What do you reckon? Were they the best team? Never to win the championship.
They were a great team, but they went on this incredible run from about early December, and the thing that stuffed us was getting beaten at Norwich. Otherwise we'd have been champions, but I was there when we got after we beat Leeds 2-0 on the Saturday, our last game, 1 point ahead, only Liverpool with a match to play. They had to win, not draw, to overtake us, and we thought we'd won the league. And to be there, Jerry Francis coming out with a team on the where did they come out on? The director's box. All on the pitch cheering and whatever. And then on the Wednesday, so I was postman in Slough, guys in the office, in the sorting office, I was on later and had the radio on, and Liverpool were 1-0 down to Wolves, so we were champions. And I had to go and do the last collection around the town centre, and I went off euphoric, and I came back, and they told me what the result was. Depressing. But I mean, what a great team! You can go through all the names of them now, and what stars they all were.
Well, it's an anniversary, isn't it, this year?
Yeah.
Is it
Next year?
No, it's this season. That's why we're doing the programme.
Oh right, I see. But the actual the
75, 76th anniversary.
Yeah.
So, if you could pick, and I don't want to put you in the spot too much, but I am. Who is your 3 favourite QPR players? I'm figuring I know what number 1 is.
Rodney Marsh, Rodney Marsh, Stan Bowles, Jerry Francis.
There you go, job done. Right, just before we go, I've got one little question to ask you. Choice between QPR winning a trophy in the next 5 years, Labour getting back into power, what would you have?
Well, that is a difficult one. That is a difficult
sneaky
one.
question.
Yeah, that is.
I would choose Labour getting back into power, lifting the economy, all the great things we're going to do that will reflect on QPR's ability to then dominate Europe for the next 10 years.
Perfect.
Good answer.
That is a brilliant answer. If you got the politics, have you ever thought about doing that? Alan, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. It's been one of the best ones we've done, and thank you so much. And hopefully we can interview you again if you.
No problem. Yeah.
Good
Thanks,
man.
lads. Come back in 10 years' time when we're
Champions of Europe.
champions of Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Open All Hours from the House of Commons. Thank you.
The QPR podcast is brought to you in association with partypoker.com. Sign up now using the bonus code QPRPOD, and Party Poker will match your initial deposit.
QPR, Green Park Rangers are on the up and up.